guest is Paul Croci, Commercial Director of Core Data, a market research firm with global presence. Core Data prides itself on identifying trends and formulating insights to help clients stay ahead and better meet challenges. Paul is currently the Commercial Director of the WA branch. He has a degree in philosophy, is an avid writer and reader, a husband and a father, and a past semi-pro soccer player. There's no doubt that all of this life experience contributes to his vision to use data to help organisations understand people better. Welcome, Paul.
Amazing. God, I didn't realise I'd done all that. I've got a degree in business, major in marketing, not philosophy. I would love to have done a degree in philosophy. And I did postgrad in language and translation.
Language translation. Okay. Well, our stalking was semi-correct, right? In the sense that, is the other details correct? Semi-pro, soccer player. Yeah, that was it. It was an interesting one.
When I was young and fit.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, yes. That's me. That's me. And look, I'm glad to see that you did your research. Because research is pretty important,
right?
Yeah.
So
that's informed how you're going to talk to me today.
That's right. So we saw you recently shared on LinkedIn the Insight book written by Anthony Tuskel. Yeah, who also wrote the storytelling.
Yes.
Oh, do you know him personally?
I've met him a few times, and then we've since corresponded a lot.
Wow.
To the point where he reached out and said, I've just written my latest book, the Insight book. Would you mind reviewing it and give me your thoughts on it? So I did, and then the next thing you know, he published them in the in the fall. And then he actually recorded an interview with me. He got me out of the blue and said, "Oh, my publisher said I should talk to some people, so I'm calling you." And next thing you know, this is being recorded. But we had a great old chat about insights.
Wow.
Anyway, yes.
So how did you find the book overall once he's published it?
Terrific. It's we agree to disagree on some aspects of insight, but ultimately I think we're definitely on the same page. From my experience, there's a couple of ways of looking at insight, right? So the first one is, and this goes along with a lot of my career where I've been in market research, and I've been in, I've spent most of my career actually on client side. So I've been working in-house for different organisations. And my title has often been head of insights or insights manager. And there's kind of a fundamental difference there, because on the client side, I wasn't actually doing the research. I was actually commissioning agencies to do that. But the real value that I was adding to the organisation was around, what does it actually mean? What do we do with this research? It's not 79% of people agree with this. It's what does that mean for our brand, and how's that going to help the decisions that we make or the actions we take as a business? And so that, for me, is where insight actually sits. It's the so what. It's what's this research actually telling me? Taz actually takes it even further and likes to remove it from research altogether and tries to look at insight is kind of like an aha moment, which actually enables then the best work to be done. And he comes at it often from a creative perspective because he's got a kind of creative agency background. But yeah, fundamentally, we both agree that the insight is not knowledge. Insight is the almost little spark of electricity where it goes beyond facts into, oh my goodness, I've understood something, kind of a profound understanding, and that understanding is going to enable me to do something different or better or just awesome.
Wow.
And anyway, his books kind of goes into unpacking all that and explaining kind of his case for what is an insight, because so many people throw around this word insights, and different people, take it to mean different things. I worked in an organisation. Well, I worked in a number, but one of them had a very technical and detailed definition of what an insight is, which went for like a paragraph and a half. Then again, I worked for another organisation where I said, so how do you kind of derive insights from the research? And he goes, oh, mate, we got lots of insights here. Look, and he just opened a PowerPoint kind of deck at random and said, hey, look at this. 50% of people said this. There's a great insight. No, that's not actually an insight. So it's one of those words that's got so many different meanings. And so in Taz's book, he tried to really nail down what is an actual insight. And he used lots of really interesting marketing-led case studies around, how a good insight was actually found, and then it was used to develop something great in the marketing or advertising sense.
Wow.
That sounds so fascinating. I feel like I personally haven't, after speaking to Alicia, I've heard about the book, but I hadn't heard about the book previous to this. So I haven't read it yet. But would you be able to recommend who would benefit from a book like this? Is it something that everyone should read, or is it really like within like the marketing space, or is it as a creative?
Look, most pragmatically, I would say definitely someone in the marketing space, and definitely someone in the creative space. So those two fields and where they overlap, anyone in any version of those should definitely read it. I think they'll find it very useful. Having said that, he's actually a classicist by training, and he's just got a really quirky and interesting writing style. So I'd actually put it out there that anyone who's got an interest in kind of ideas and how they come about, and are just interested in reading things that are well written and kind of quirky in a way, I think just get on board. He's just a really interesting, smart guy, and it's very readable.
That's brilliant. And so, in your words, how would you define an insight? What is an insight?
It's I will go with it's a profound understanding. If I haven't defined it already in all my waffle up today, it's a profound understanding of people, or a person, or a cohort of people that actually takes you really into the reality of their life. So I'd love to give you an example. Actually, I'll give you a really interesting example. I worked at Nivea for a bunch of years, or a company called Beiersdorf, and their big brands are Nivea and Elastoplast, and doing a lot of work in the Nivea Sun category, because that was really interesting. Nivea had all this kind of heritage as a brand in the moisturising space, and then you come to Australia, and we've got like one of the harshest sun care markets in the world for a few reasons. One, because the sun is damn strong over here. But secondly, we've had sunscreen is actually a regulated product over here. You've got to get TGA approved, I think it's TGA, to actually be able to sell a sunscreen, because the consequences are pretty dire if you sell a faulty sunscreen. But what was really interesting is in Europe, where kind of Beiersdorf's headquarters are, the regulations aren't as stringent, and so you can talk about things like tanning. And so, and so it's in the context of a sunscreen. It's one of the really 1980s for us in Australia.
Yeah.
And so they came up with a really cool product concept where they had an ingredient in it which allows your body to tan naturally. So there's the kind of tanning function in your body, and then there's the actual burning thing that actually protects your skin from burning. And the two are actually separate. If your skin gets exposed to sunlight, both happen. But this particular product enabled tanning totally safely, because it was separate to any damage to your skin. It was just increasing melatonin. Anyway, and it was so interesting actually doing research into that, because we thought, well, there's definitely a need here, because people often say, I try to prevent myself from sunburn. That's why I use sunscreen, obviously. Yeah. But when you scratch a bit further, lots and lots of people still like to get a tan. And so we thought, well, maybe there is an opportunity here to actually launch this product, which does really well in Europe, over here in Australia. And it was just, it was amazing how polarizing it was, because the insight was, for some people, it absolutely was bang on with how they viewed a tan and their time in the sun was, give me this. I need this now. This is perfect. I'm not going to burn. I'm going to be totally safe, but I'm going to get a nice tan. For others, and we did not foresee this to the degree it came out, was no tan is a safe tan. I can't believe you're actually doing this. I can't believe you're even considering this. It is putting me off the brand altogether that they would even consider launching something like this, because no tan is safe. And so you've got same product, same demographic kind of cohort of people, completely different responses. And so, the two different kind of levels of insight there.
So how do you then, just a next step further with that example, how do you, when you receive that data, do you then, or that insight, do you then continue to pursue it, or how would you then determine that? Because it's very split then, I suppose.
Absolutely. And there's ways that you could look at that. So first of all, this decision was taken. We did that research piece, and we then paused kind of the whole kind of project to try to look at launching this product, to see if there was, to prepare a business case to see if we could bring it in over here. We paused that straight away because the most important thing was A, people's safety, obviously, and B, people's perceptions of the brand. And so that was actually canned quite quickly from senior people in the organisation, just going, cool, get it, very interesting, but we're not prepared to go down this path. We're a caring organisation. We just don't want to be seen in this light. Perfect, that's fine. If, however, it was a different organisation and an organisation that thought, you know what, we're willing to take on this risk because our brand is a bit more quirky, a bit more risky, a bit more edgy, then I would probably have taken that into a quantitative study. So you could actually look at, okay, we've seen these two views. Let's see how big they actually are. And if you see that anti-view, the ones that are pushing back, if they end up being most of the market out there, then, okay, maybe there's a business case not to do it. But if they're actually more in the minority, you might actually, as a brand, then decide, we'll give this a go. So I would have progressed it into another stage of research to get a bit more of market validation.
Wow. That's a really good example, which then makes me lead on to the next question. Yeah. Can you describe what market research is? Because it's definitely one of those terms thrown around. Personally, I would struggle to explain that, and you're an expert in it. So are you able to explain it to us?
Yeah, okay. Market research, it is an interesting one because it does mean, it's another one that kind of means different things to different people. And what do you think of when you first hear the words market research? What do you, I guess I'll throw it to you, Alicia and Jess.
For me, I think of people. Obviously, that people is the market, like an area that you are researching, or like a segment of a demographic, or I don't know. That's my terms. Jess?
Yeah, I suppose asking questions to a group of people to find out things.
Before I got into the industry, they're actually pretty good answers. Before I got into the industry, and just going back, and we'll talk about this soon because I think you want to ask me about how I got into the industry, but I used to think of it as, that's someone on the other end of the phone ringing up at a bloody annoying time, wanting to know my opinion, or someone standing with a clipboard somewhere and trying to ask me questions.
Please take this survey.
Yeah.
And those two things are kind of part of market research. They're two different ways to actually do it, and you would choose to do those for different audiences and different needs. Mm-hmm. Market research ultimately is about finding out information, and I always try to bring it back to information that actually empowers an organisation. So if an organisation, and I always try to bring it back to, I guess, working with clients or whether I'm working in-house, it's what decision are we trying to make? What action are we trying to take? And try to really drill in on those things. And then go, cool, if that's what we want to do, what information do we need to have to enable us to take that decision or take that action? And those bits of knowledge that you actually identify, that actually we don't have this, we don't know about the consumers we're going to be launching it into, or we don't know anything about how they're shopping this category in the first place, or we don't know anything about how our ad is going to land with this particular audience. Whatever these bits of knowledge actually are, and that's kind of where I work with, again, with clients or internal stakeholders to really crystallise what you want to do, what you want to know. Then research is the process to actually undertaking that and getting that knowledge. I often like to call market research as almost a reality check for marketers. Mm-hmm. I've worked with lots. I've worked alongside. Work as a marketer. I've worked alongside lots of marketers over the years. I mean, no disrespect to any of them. But I know that it's so easy to get so close to your brand and your product that it's you kind of lose sight of hang on, this isn't about me and what I know about it, because I know so much and I'm immersed in it. I love it and I think about it all the time. It's about the people out there who have got so many other things actually going on.
Yeah.
It's about actually what do they think of your brand or your service or your product or whatever it is you're trying to actually bring to their attention. And market research is what gives you that.
So what's then the process of like gathering that market research? So obviously gathering, analysing, and then sharing that. Can you shed some more light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So once you've actually defined, well, what is it that we actually need to know here? Then you would either do it in-house if you've got the capabilities, or you would talk to someone who knows how to do it, whether it's a market research agency or someone else who's skilled to actually design, well, if that's the information we need to know, what's the best methodology to actually go about getting that information? So if you want to know, for instance, you might be trying to set your marketing strategy and you might need to know, well, actually, what's our problem here? What's our problem? Is the problem that no one really knows our brand? In which case you might do a large-scale quantitative study, which is all about not a lot of depth in the questions you ask, but you're asking lots of people. So you're getting a very statistically representative sample of your market to determine, yeah, actually it's about 70% of people actually know us. Maybe awareness, maybe that's a good number. Maybe awareness isn't our problem. But only 10% seem to get it right when we ask them, well, what is it they actually do? So your problem mightn't be awareness, it might be understanding. Now to then unpack, well, what do they understand instead? What are the challenges here? What do we need to actually say to them to help them understand what it is we actually do? That's when you need a different type of study. You need a qualitative study, which is not talking to as many people, not a wide group, smaller group, but getting into a lot of depth with them to actually really unpack the why and the how and that sort of thing. So once you've actually defined what it is you're trying to find out, you work out what's the best methodology to actually do that. So if it's quantitative, it's often surveys. If it's qualitative, there's lots of things you can actually do, whether it's focus groups, whether it's one-on-one interviews or paired interviews, or three of us like we're doing here. You can do online bulletin boards. You can do what's called ethnography, where you actually go in and actually just spy on people. Well, not spy on people, sorry.
Sounds good.
I didn't say that. No, you can go. So I think of things like accompanied shops. So you might meet up, you pre-arrange to meet with a participant. You might do a little interview with them beforehand, then you follow them into a shop or whatever it is you do, and you actually just observe. You observe what they're actually doing, and you might observe other people in store at the same time and just, you might do that sort of analysis. There's lots of different qualitative research you can do. And so, so then you work out what methodology should you do. Then you actually go and do the data gathering, whether it's deploying the surveys, whether it's doing the qualitative. Then it's the analysing time, and you can let your data scientists and stats geeks loose on large-scale quantitative data and let them do all their modelling and everything, and you can get some really super insights out of that. With your qualitative, you might do more interpretive, thematic sort of analysis of what sort of things are coming out. We've spoken to a bunch of people. She said that, but those people were talking about this sort of thing. Where does the truth lie? And that's kind of more a qualitative analysis.
Yeah.
And then once you've done your analysis, you sort of feed it all up into a report generally, and then that's disseminated. I guess it gets presented, perhaps it gets workshopped, perhaps. I like to look beyond just your normal kind of just, well, here's your report, here's your presentation. I like to look at, well, who within the organisation is going to use this? You know, is it head of marketing? Great, and their team? Perfect. But you know what? Sales would actually get a lot out of this as well. Let's set up a mini workshop to actually talk to the salespeople and pull out, here's the kind of thing it's saying, and this is why they'll be relevant to you and how you can make different decisions. Customer experience is another big one. Love to have customer experience people in the room. We'll do separate sessions with them, helping them understand the customer journey. So, defining the issue, working out what knowledge you need, defining your methodology, deploying it, analysing it, and then rolling it out.
I love it. I feel like I don't think I realized how many different ways that you can gather the data is probably the thing that I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. So obviously you've got a huge passion for this. Very, very obvious in the way that you talk about it. How did you actually get into market research? Was it just a natural progression, or is it like, no, that's my thing, I'm going for it?
Kind of a personality thing, I think, to a degree. I've always been a big reader. I'm always interested in learning things and thinking about things and interpreting them and trying to understand why is that happening. So perhaps it is a bit of a personality thing. I did do a business degree. I majored in marketing. I did some market research subjects as part of marketing. So coming out of that, I kind of had it in my head that, oh yeah, that's standard part of marketing. Yeah, everyone in marketing just goes and does research all the time.
Yeah.
And then I came out of uni and had a couple of jobs and got my first job in marketing was working for a marketing consulting firm. That was I was actually the marketing arm of the Qantas Telstra Visa card at the time. And that was way back when that launched. And it was just so interesting because I was just interested in learning more about, well, why are we marketing this way, or to these people? Who chose that target audience? And why is this sort of messaging good? And honestly, so much, it was just, oh, such and such said so. Oh, that senior person said so. Oh, the client wants it this way. And I became, well, okay, yeah, but why?
Why?
And so I ended up leaving that organisation for a bunch of reasons, but I was still really thinking about there's got to be more. There's got to be more, right? And so I started applying for jobs in market research, and I landed one with Roy Morgan, who, fun fact, Australia's oldest market research agency.
Wow.
Found in Australia, apparently. And I worked for them for 5 years, and man, that was just like a growth trajectory like this, just of knowledge and of personal growth, just understanding the kind of stuff that was being done and how it was influencing the work that clients actually did and how they went to market. So, that's kind of how I got into it.
I love that. So I feel like you've obviously had quite a few varied roles. Do you have any career highlights or projects that stood out to you that you're like, oh, that was a good one? There's
lots that I've worked on, right? But there's and it depends on my mood, it depends on the day. But two kind of came to mind when I saw you were going to ask me that question. Two came to mind. I don't know why. Or one I do know why. So I'll start with that one. The first one was again when I was at Nivea. This was super, super interesting. So kind of from a conceptual perspective, I loved the idea of this research. But then the other reason I really loved this was because it actually didn't just involve me as head of insights. It also involved the head of marketing, but also the whole marketing team. I got them all involved on it because it was a real master brand thing. It wasn't Nivea. It wasn't like Nivea Body or Nivea Face or Nivea Sun. It was the heartland for the whole marketing organisation. So I had to kind of take them all on the journey, and they were keen to be involved, but it was one that really just cut across all product categories. It also involved our whole, our ad agency, our media agency, our digital agency, our PR agency. Everyone was on the journey for this, and I kind of led that project, and I just loved kind of bringing everyone together. And that's why this particular project comes to mind. So it was to do with the Nivea master brand. Historically, the brand came from Europe, right? And so it had been around for, they celebrated 100 years just after, just before I started. So they've been around for ages. So they had this strong heritage in Europe where they were really known as a caring brand. And there were so many kind of socio-cultural little touch points that re-emphasised this through the generations. So there were lots of things. They used to advertise in Europe around things like a child would go out to school in winter and the mum would, put a little dab of Nivea cream on their nose, cheeks or something. It was this little caring little thing. And everyone could relate to it because that's what they did, because your skin would get dry and in the cold when they're out in the wind and everything. So that was just a very common thing. So it was always known for care. Come to Australia, it was a more recently introduced brand here. It was under license for many years, and only, I think, in the early 2000s, I think it came to be re-owned by by the parent company Beiersdorf. And so it had didn't have this strong legacy for caring. What it was actually known for over here was sun, super interesting. And what was the other one? It was also known for deodorant, I think, as well. So it didn't have this, and those two categories are very functional. Deodorant has to work, has to perform, right? It's strong, and all these, you look at all the cues in deodorant advertising, right? It's not about, oh, it's caring and really nice. It's, and sun cream as well. Sun cream is all about, it's got to be effective. It's got to stop the burn. So over here, Nivea was really known for these functional categories, and which is not for caring at all. And so globally, we wanted to be known for caring. And the view was actually, we've done a lot of brand work over here and realised, well, we stand for a lot of good things in the minds of consumers, but not for caring. So how do we bring caring into the Nivea master brand, and how we then communicate the rest of our kind of products? And so, yeah, I led a massive research project on that, and it involved everything from like the agency partners kind of coming up with different creatives we could test and different ways we could articulate caring, but even understanding Australian consumers, lots of qualitative research around what does care mean to you? What sort of examples show that someone cares, or can an organisation even care? And yeah, the answer was, yeah, they can, but they've got to do these sorts of things to show that they care. So that was a brilliant project, because at the end of it, we actually came up with a whole roadmap, which then fed into brand guidelines and every single touch point that the Nivea brand kind of came out with. So, yeah, loved it. That's one that lives on in my memory, just because it was so comprehensive and so conceptually, I just loved the idea of it. Any questions on that? I've got one more example, but...
Oh, I was just going to ask about how the market research, or for example, that example you gave with Nivea, how much you have to do with the other departments, and how much does it affect even in like a branding scheme? And it's more like the implementation side of things. But feel free to, throw in that other example.
That sort of project basically rolled out to the whole Australia-New Zealand organisation, basically, because it affected everyone, from the way that customer service kind of talked to people, through to how we market ourselves in store, through to obviously above the line, how we're a very TV-led organisation. So, yeah, it kind of affected everyone from an implementation.
No wonder you love the projects. Like, I feel like to see that work and then it moved out into the departments, into the world. Whew, yeah,
it was cool. Yeah, and look, the other example I was going to share is just one that was very kind of formative for me. So when I was at Samsung, it was pretty interesting, because I was working in Samsung when I started. I started there in 2009. When I started, it was just kind of starting to really gain traction in Australia. It had been operating in Australia for a number of years, but they were starting to take a more not professional, it's not the word, but a more sophisticated approach to marketing. That marketing was starting to get more prominent. And I'm talking about brand marketing. They were calling it corporate marketing back in the day, because up until that point, they've been so product focused. And the marketing team, well, there were different marketing teams. There was one for TVs, there was one for phones, there was one for computers, there was one for white goods. What else was there? Yeah, there was a whole bunch of different kind of product silos there, and each of them had their own marketing department. And they all and their marketing was very, let's just move the products. How do we sell more products? And so when I joined because they just formed a corporate marketing division, which was designed to, let's build the Samsung brand. How can we really trade off that equity and use that to lift up our performance in all our product categories? Which was just a real change of direction for them, but they haven't looked back since. It's just, you can see what they've become now. They're an amazing organisation.
Yeah.
But one of the early projects that I worked on for them, so I'd done a bit of kind of things like ad testing before, but this was the one where advertising evaluation, optimization, really, this was fundamental for me, for my learnings, and for, I just saw the power of what it could actually do. And so the project was working closely with the TVs division, because they were doing TV advertising, and we found out that the TV ads were going really, really well. Okay, they were well recalled. Who had seen the ads, they knew that they'd seen them. They liked them. They were persuasive. They didn't know that they were for Samsung.
Wow.
They're mostly misattributed to Sony back in those days, sometimes LG, but mostly Sony. And so there was a real issue. the head of TV marketing was going, how do we fix this? Because we've got great ads not doing the job. In fact, they're doing a job for our competitors. How do we fix this? And so I led a project to look at, well, how do we make the master brand more prominent? How do we make our branding come through more strongly and TV was the lead category, but I realised it wasn't just for TV. The same issue was happening to a greater or lesser degree in our other categories as well. So it was, I led a large-scale project to actually look at how can we improve the branding, and we got a whole bunch of learnings out of that, which were then rolled out to the other product categories as well.
Wow. So it sounds like each sort of business or project that you take on is quite diverse based on the problem or the need, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely.
And so leads me on to another question. What types of decisions can market research help a business owner make, in particular maybe a small to medium business?
Yeah, honestly, lots. But I do have to kind of qualify this a little bit, because when we talk about market research, I've talked about, so far when you ask me about how to define it, I've talked about what's called primary research, where you are actually going out and collecting data yourself. There's also something called secondary research, which is where you're looking at studies that have been done in the past, or where you're reading or you're Googling or you're looking at other ways to get research that's already been done and analysing that. There's a real art to kind of synthesising that sort of stuff, data from lots of different sources that has already been kind of published out there. So sometimes business owners, especially smaller business owners, can start off with secondary data, secondary research or desk research. So that's often a cost-effective way to actually start your journey there. But to answer your question, so what sort of decisions can help a business make? Anything where you've got a knowledge gap, anything where you think, okay, I've got a problem here. How do I increase sales?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how do I increase sales? I could try to get more people to buy my product. Okay, great. You can do research around who's buying it now, why are they buying it, who's not buying it, are they buying your competitors, what sort of needs they have in the category, how can you start to tailor a message to bring more people in to buy your product. Maybe that's one way to do it. Maybe to increase sales revenue, maybe it's getting the same people who are currently buying it to buy more or buy more frequently. Again, you can start to do research around, why do you buy this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's stopping you from buying more? So research can help there. Research can help with how you communicate your brand. Are you saying the right things? Or are you saying things that people, they get it, but doesn't really resonate with them? Research can help you optimize your creative. Maybe the insight is strong. Yeah, it's the whole story that you've based around a consumer insight or need that you've identified might actually resonate really well, but the way it's being brought to life doesn't work. Or vice versa, they might love the ad that's really persuasive, but they don't quite connect with the actual need itself. So there's lots of research you can do around how to improve your marketing, how you communicate with people you want to reach. What else can it help you do? You can honestly, if you've written down, how best to spend your marketing dollars, which channels are working more effectively for you.
Yeah.
Yes, you can do a lot of that in a digital context, but you can also do a lot of whether it's media mix modeling, which is based on different people's recall of your brand across different channels. You can use it to evaluate and improve your customer experience. Core data, we do a lot of this work. We love it. It's evaluating what sort of journey do people actually go through to actually get to your product or service or use it. We did a super project recently with actually I won't mention who the client is, but they had a real hypothesis around, well, this is why people buy our particular product. And this is their journey. We think this is what they do. They kind of start off, they have a need, then they start to do some research of their own, then they make their choice, get some quotes going and buy it. And when we actually did the research, it was super interesting because it was sort of like that, but people were in this just this hover phase, often for years, where they're going, yeah, I think I need this. Probably will get it at some point. Not sure. They might do some research, but that's more like just informing themselves a little bit. And it's only when a certain trigger happens that they go, oh my God, I'm going to get it. And then they went into a secondary phase of research where it was more pointed research. The first one is just kind of exploratory information. The second one is it included getting quotes and then comparing quotes against each other and going back and asking for this and then reading about that and then reviews and all sorts of other stuff and other channels came into play before they moved forward. And so being able to identify those two different journey stages and the triggers was so important to this client because there was this whole big black spot that they just didn't know. And then they've shifted all their marketing with this in mind. How do we identify when this trigger happens? Great, when this happens, this is what we're actually going to do. This is what we're going to communicate because we know this is their need. This is what they're feeling. They're actually fearful at this stage. So they're able to tailor their messaging around the consumer's emotions and give them the right tools and information to make that decision and to do their second stage of research and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so customer journey mapping is and another valuable thing that market research does for organisations.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, there's lots.
So many. I'm a personal fan of like client journey mapping. I think it's super valuable, especially as a small business owner, because I think we presume a lot of things in business, and what I'm sort of getting is going in and asking why, and maybe not presume as much as what you think you know is a big thing. You've mentioned like senior directors that possibly had an idea of their consumer that necessarily has been proven wrong after the research, which I find quite interesting.
It is. And look, there's a couple of things there. So one is it's not necessarily bad to have your own views on it and to have your own hypothesis. In fact, that's really important. And I love to find that out before we actually do any research because you need to kind of know what your stakeholders' current beliefs actually even are. And so testing a hypothesis is often a really good way to do research. But then the other part of it is, you do sometimes run the risk of finding something that completely contradicts quite senior and powerful stakeholders. And this, my personal view is I'm very collaborative. I love to, I don't know every answer. I don't know everything. I love to surround myself with other people who may be able to contribute. Together we'll know more. Right? And so I love working with clients and taking people on the journey. This is what we're looking at. What do you think? And so you get senior stakeholders whenever you can to actually buy into this. And, you show that you actually listen to them and you respect their views and their hypotheses.
Yep.
You might, grill them a little bit on, okay, so what have you seen that supports that hypothesis? Great, it's great, we'll look out for that. But once they're taken on the journey, if they find out something that completely contradicts what they thought, they're open to it because they've seen exactly what you're doing. They know you're coming from a place of learning, not a place of, I'm going to prove you wrong. And plus, they've got like this vested interest then. They've got skin in the game.
I love that phrase, skin in the game.
Yeah, I don't use that often, but it's true.
Oh, I use it a lot. You got to have skin in the game. From my change management years, skin in the game. Yeah. So as a small to medium business owner, if I was going into, or I wanted to do some market research myself, could you give hot tip, hot take on where I should start? Yeah.
So the first place to start is start with yourself in your organisation and have a think about and try to frame it in what are we trying to actually do here. Maybe if you're doing some sort of strategic planning, that's a perfect time to actually do it because you start to think about, okay, let's do this strategy. What is it we actually need to know to do this properly? And question yourself. Do you know that or do you just assume that?
Yep.
So because that sort of process by actually thinking, what do we do? What do we actually know? What do we just think we know? Or what do we not know? Identifying those sorts of things will help you identify areas that you might actually need to do research in. But then the next thing to actually do is talk to people. I think talking to people is so important and underrated. I would say email or pick up the phone, look at different research agencies out there, talk to more than one. A good research agency, and this is how one of the ways you know that you're working with a good one, is they'll be happy to chat. They'll be happy to listen to you and maybe give you some advice. Because they know that even if you're small and you don't have the budget now, down the track you might. And if they've given you the time, then you'll be kind of in their good books for the future. Or people move to different organisations, blah, blah, blah. But good research agencies are generally happy. They love talking about research and they love talking about ideas and challenges and problems. So get on the phone or drop an email and just surface your thinking with them. And say, look, I think I've got this knowledge gap around this. How might I tackle it? What's the best way to go about it? What sort of money would that actually cost me to take?
Yeah.
Now, you don't necessarily, and these conversations are obligation free. And you can even be transparent with that. Say, look, I don't know if I've got any money to spend on this. I don't know how, if I do, I don't know how much I have to spend on it. But I'd like to, I'm new to this. I'd love to just learn more about what I could do here. And they will give you some guidance. Because that leads me to the third thing. There are lots of free tools out there. There are. So everyone's come across SurveyMonkey before. It's a terrible respondent experience. It's worse to actually trying to analyse it yourself when the results actually come in. But look, it's not a bad tool. It can do the job. The problem is you need to, we have this saying, if you've done a lot of work in data, you know the idea of garbage in, garbage out. If you
You're ticking all the phrases, Joe. I love that one as well.
No, but it's true. So, if you know how to spec out the research study, if you know how to think about how to structure questions and structure the order of questions, so you're not priming people or you're actually phrasing them appropriately that they're going to tell you what you think you're going to get out of them, then go ahead and use a free tool, and that's okay. But it's more important to have someone who can guide you through that.
Yep.
So there's that. And then there's things like Zappy Store. I don't know if you've come across that. It's kind of a DIY. You kind of go on there and go, this is the type of research I want to actually do. Here's now, look, some of these are not ideal. A research agency, putting my core data hat on, a research agency will have all sorts of checks and balances around who the sample is that you're actually talking to, how you can guarantee that they're not bots, that they're actually actual quality, and that if there are any issues with the data, and there are lots of different issues that can emerge. Like we've got things called speeders, people who just click through just to finish the survey and get whatever incentives they get. There are things like, there are lots of different ways that people and a good research agency will have checks and balances to actually strip those out and make sure you're getting a good quality sample. They will do really good analysis. It's not just, 20% of people said this. It's, well, actually, yes, 20% said this. But when you split it by these, then you can actually see that overall it's 20%, but these ones are 70%. What does that tell us? So a good research agency will enable you to do a lot more analysis. So the proper research agencies. But having said that, a DIY, place like your Zappy, whatever, will give you some results. And if you don't have a big budget or a lot of history in actually doing research, it's not the worst place to start.
Okay. So I just to circle back, you mentioned secondary research. So if I was doing some of that secondary and I was going to the good old Google to do some research, are there any, so you've mentioned this Zappy, is there any other places that I could, I don't know, Google some really, I know, if you're doing psychology, you have cited research papers that you can refer to, for example. Is there something like that for market research? Not really.
And look, I should qualify, something like Zappy Store, you do have to pay for it, but it's a lot cheaper than going to research agencies. They do things bespokely. Look, honestly, it just really depends on what your what it is you're trying to research.
Yeah.
So, for instance, we will build in secondary research. We, again, core data, will build in secondary research into just about everything we do because there's a base level of knowledge that you can actually get out there.
Yep.
And it does range from Googling, but there's lots of reputable sites out there. Often places like AICD publish their own things.
Nice.
There are things like Harvard Business Review publish things. You kind of look for the reputable stuff. You can also go to what's it called, where you look for academic papers online. Sometimes they get very abstract though. But then there's often one of the things I find really interesting is a lot of kind of industry bodies produce research on behalf of their members. So if you're in a certain industry and you're wanting to understand consumers, have a look at the industry body for your industry. They might have done stuff already. So you can look at things like that. And I've got to say, ChatGPT isn't bad as a starting point either. It'll give you kind of a
old AI.
Well, it's, you're going to ask me about trends, and like it or not, it's there. I certainly don't love it, but, you have to pretty much check everything that comes out of it. But sometimes, if you ask it questions, it can point you in different directions that are useful doing secondary research.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll point out is if you are working with like a media agency or an ad agency or a digital agency, these agencies have access to all sorts of different data sources. So lean on your agency partners. Lean in a nice way, but ask them, maybe I should say. I'm looking at this. Have you seen anything on this? You never know. And look, some of the bigger media agencies, and this is one of the arguments for going with a bigger media agency. Sorry, there's lots of arguments for not going with a big media agency, but one of the big arguments for going with a big media agency is they do have access to lots and lots of tools. They'll get access to Roy Morgan data, which is brilliant if you, at a high level, if you give you a starting point on any category out there, or most categories out there. So lean on your agency partners as well if you can.
Good. Well, I think there's some great tips in there.
Yeah, and you've touched on the whole trends thing. You beat us to it.
Yeah.
Are some trends that have surprised you and you foresee coming up in the years to come or next year?
Yeah, look, the one that has leapt out at me, and this is based purely on what do you call it? It's kind of confirmation bias because I've kind of noticed it once and now I'm noticing it everywhere. So I don't know how real it actually is, but I think it's a trend around this. There's almost this pivot back to analog. And so I've seen it in a few. I mean, we've seen the vinyl thing in music for a number of years now. But I've been reading more and more about things like people switching off and looking at digital devices as real time wasters, and even worse, like neurological barriers to actual creative thought. They don't let you be bored, and boredom is one of those catalysts for creativity. Because your mind puts in a gear. So I've seen kind of more and more communication around putting devices aside, switching off. I've also seen, and I was, just before we got on this, I was trying to Google and actually find it because I read about a new publication coming out where they've just gone, we're doing print only, we're not doing digital at all, which is like, wow, that's taking me back. And I can't remember what it was called, but it was a really cool idea. And so there's a few things like that I was seeing where it's kind of deliberately turning away from the digital as a solution. So I wonder how far that's going to go. I think there's definitely a need out there for people to have their time to actually switch off and move away from that. I don't know if you've picked up on that in your industry.
For me, I've noticed print is not as dead for a period of time.
Print is not dead.
Definitely not dead. I
think personally, I've seen, like, with the moving towards more AI, people want more that human interaction. And I think traditionalism, or even if that's a word, or traditional aspects, I think will be more appreciated. That's what I've noticed. Jess, have you noticed anything like that?
Well, I find it quite interesting that you mentioned that move to analog, because I see. I love a good TikTok, I must admit, and I see there is a trend on TikTok with like the younger generation moving towards flip phones are back. Like flip phones. Yeah, so they're moving towards flip phones because you can't get on social media on a flip phone. You can send a text and make a message and take a really shitty photo. Like that's all you can do on a flip phone. And so they're moving towards more of that and not being so connected, which is, I mean, we grew up in an era of the internet and I could not imagine not having the internet, and I can't function without Google Maps, like where I should be able to function with Google Maps because I've driven this route, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 times. So I find that really interesting. And that's something that I've noticed when you mentioned that. I was like, oh yeah, there is some common traits there.
Oh, it wasn't just me then. I had seen the flip phone thing. That was,
Yeah, that's interesting. So is there any other insights that you've come across in your career? Because this is a question we haven't quite prepared, but I was like, I need to ask you this. Is there any insights that you've come across your whole your whole career that you were surprised about, or was like, wow, I never thought about that, or that was kind of really memorable?
Funny, the one that came to mind, and I don't know why, when you said that, I will share it. It was look, I was super thrilled at this one because this was a real, I think it was a real insight in the sense that it told us something that we just did not expect, and maybe we should have expected it, but we were maybe looking at it from the wrong angle. This was in the category of, again, this was in Nivea days again. This was working with, we had a new brand manager on Nivea Body, and she was just coming into she was new to the company. She was fairly young. She was coming into it with fresh eyes, which was great. It was a great product, I guess, for Nivea. Their body lotion was just great. It was high penetration, high sales kind of over the years, but it was on a long-term decline. And there was a lot of research done on this without really cracking the problem. And what kind of cracked it for us, and the problem was we couldn't actually do anything about it. This is why it was kind of frustrating for me and memorable for me, because the company wasn't set up to kind of spend the budget this way. But what was really interesting about it was the underlying reason for the long-term decline was that people, like there were people who used body lotion and used it quite regularly and religiously, and that's what they did. Great. There are a lot of people, though, who used it really occasionally. And there were a few barriers to using it more frequently. Part of it was really busy, don't have time, or maybe I'll just get out of the shower, but then I have to wait until I dry before I actually put on the moisturiser, then I have to put it on and then I have to wait until it soaks in before I can get dressed and things like that. So it was seen as a bit of a nuisance, even though they did see the value in it. And Nivea, to their credit, based on that knowledge, came out with a really cool product, which was in-shower body lotion.
I know that, yes.
There you go. So, and that sold really well. It was a really clever kind of insight. But that product aside, the core products, the standard body lotions, were still declining. And I remember talking to this brand manager about it, and she was saying, we've got to just like, what can we do to turn that around? And we were looking at the research that we'd done, and then it kind of appeared. It was this idea, well, actually, what it is, it's a habit thing. People get, they do it here and there. But there's barriers. It's not easy. It's not convenient. It's not this. And we were just talking about this, and it was like, it's kind of like, going to the gym. We know that we kind of should, and we go here and there, but it's just a hassle to get up and do it. And we kind of looked at each other going, that's exactly what it is. And it was like, where can we go with this? And the idea was, it's to turn this around. I think we need to actually focus rather than on just trying to sell a product, or look at the traditional brand cues around we're the most moisturising or the most trusted or whatever. it's not about that at all. It wasn't about the traditional way of marketing. It was about, no, what can we do? What cues can we take from other categories that are focused on trying to create a habit? And you look at things like healthy eating, and then you see the advent of things like HelloFresh and everything sort of coming in. Right. These are all different levers completely that we'd never even considered before. How can we take some of these levers to apply them to Nivea Body to actually try to get people into the habit of actually using body lotion? And, you know, we were tossing around all sorts of ideas, and this is where we started to brief the ad agency, but it didn't kind of go any further because that year's budget had been already spent, and then this is how good ideas die within an organisation. But for me, when you ask about an interesting insight, that's the one that kind of came to mind, because it was like, wow, that's a completely different way of understanding what the real problem was in this category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
even though the solution didn't end up happening.
Yeah, I was going to say, you almost assume it's something else, but then, yeah, that's a really good example, and very memorable. Habits are challenging, I think, in regards to people, and which leads me to my next question, which is about how much does culture influence market or market research?
So what do you mean by culture?
Like company culture or culture within within a country or within like you just spoke about habits. I would assume that's sort of like people's kind of culture of more so in relation to that. So it probably links to behavior more so.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether you were referring to company culture or like kind of culture. So from a, I guess, a cultural point of view, it makes a huge difference. There's a very basic way of looking at it, which is kind of country of origin. So again, it's another Nivea example. We knew that people who had come from either the Middle East or from Europe were more in the habit of using moisturising creams, body lotions, and especially the thicker ones like Nivea Creme, which is really, really thick. And were more had a higher affinity with the Nivea brand because of their history with it. So that's more just a plain and simple kind of geographical kind of thing. But then again, culture does play a huge role in terms of how you actually talk to people and how you actually work it out. So I know, for example, if you are undertaking research with, say, some of our First Nations people over here, and Core Data, work with a partner agency who specialises in this sort of thing, where you've got to build in things like yarning time at the start to actually set the scene and actually kind of fit in culturally. You can't just come in and go, hey, we're doing an interview, let's just do this. So different cultures have got very interesting kind of aspects to them. And there are different research agencies that actually very much specialise in working with different cultures. Yeah, it's kind of like translation in a way as well. You can try to do the translation yourself, or you can work with experts who actually understand the cultural context of the translation as well.
How interesting.
Yeah, that's very fascinating.
I love that. Well, look, Paul, I have loved this session. It has been so good.
Awesome.
It's so interesting. And I feel like I've got books to read. I've got things to implement in my own business. So thank you very much. And we're gonna start wrapping it up. But before we do,
that's okay.
We would love to understand from your perspective where you see in the next 12 months or so some of the influences of market trends that consumers or people should be looking out for. Do you have any hot tips in that space, or other than analog? Everyone moving to analog.
Everyone moving to analog and everyone moving to
Print is
AI.
not dead.
I reckon there is going to be some craziness that happens with AI and deep fake or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think
deep fake. Oh, that's like a whole nother.
Yeah. So I think we just got to be on the just tread carefully with that.
Mm-hmm.
What's the word? triggers care. Oh, I can't remember. There's like a saying. But yeah, I think we just kind of keep one eye on it, because I think something like, did you see the Eminem thing? It was famous DJ, David Guetta, I think it was.
Mm.
What
he
about it?
He basically he said, oh, I'm going to play with AI, and I'm pretty sure it was David Guetta, unless I've got mixed up. But he said, yeah, I'm going to play with AI, and so he went into one of the verbal ones, like I think it was Chat GPT. He said, come up with a rap about future rave. That's his genre. In the style of Eminem. Then he went into another one and said, put the text into it and said, give me Eminem's voice, because this was a voice copy.
Yeah.
And so he recorded this clip. And I'm like, that sounds like Eminem. It clearly wasn't. And
Wow.
So I think that's where, when you talk about trends and things, I think that we're going to see a lot more of that sort of thing. And there could be some interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And as I said, that could be like the whole deep fake thing I could talk about for ages, because like when it comes to marketing, influencers or influencer marketing, and I'm like, you see now a lot of, well, from what I've seen or heard or read, influencer marketing and how they can create these influencers that they're not real. They're these fake, they're these imaginary people that sell you products that look amazing and are in these beautiful holiday destinations and have this, I don't know, luscious hair that sells shampoo, but they're not real.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
So yes, I love that. That's very on point. Brilliant. So one more final question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, you go. Final question.
I was going to say, what's in store for you personally and professionally in the next 12 months?
Yes, I'm going out on my own. Very exciting.
Yay!
So I've been wanting to do this for ages. But the real... So you've spoken to me for a little while. Alicia, I've spoken to you a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we've got it connected here. But you can see how passionate I am about insights in particular.
Yeah.
And I'm just on this mission to empower marketers when it comes to research. A lot of marketers are just busy. They've got so many important things to actually do. They've got like marketing budgets to spend and sales targets that they're being chased for. And research can fall by the wayside. But part of the problem also, again, from having lots of conversations, is that they don't have, it's not just that they don't have the time, but it's also the kind of the knowledge and the confidence to actually tackle it. And so that's where I'm actually looking. I want to raise marketers' confidence in planning, commissioning, and using research. So I'm going out on my own to actually do that. And I'm happy to give you more of a spiel.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
That's good. That's exciting. It's always a exciting and scary and exciting again. I'm doing the sandwich. When you go out and you step into something new, specifically your own thing. So
Thank you.
Finally, so where can our listeners find you? Like on social media? Like where are you?
LinkedIn.
Yay!
And when I actually launch, you'll probably see a bit of Instagram action too.